Hey there. Welcome to my channel. I'm Solomon, and I'm here to share with you the wisdom that I've gathered and continue to gather in my life, hoping it adds value to yours. If you want to check out my work, my website is in the description box. And if you want to support this channel, do hit that subscribe button. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you get something out of this.
How you doing, Solomon?
Good. How you doing?
This is my program, Ordinary People.
All right.
So the beginnings of who Solomon is and where Solomon come from, and just a little background on who you are.
Ordinary person with extraordinary abilities. So, in terms of background, I was born and raised in Yemen in a refugee camp. My parents met there. So, as a refugee, of course, being a refugee is not an ordinary phase of life. It's a defining set of experiences and a defining identity.
Well, let me pause you and say, refugee, far as my limited knowledge, that seems like a hard hit on life to even claim that per se you were a refugee. So can you elaborate a little bit on what that really means to you?
Right. The term refugee means essentially, legally speaking, that you don't have a nationality. So for me, my nationality is my status as a refugee. So that's what it means to be a refugee for me. And it is a hard way of life, but I think for me, the thing is, as opposed to a lot of refugees, the majority of refugees would become refugees after having lived and grown up in their respective countries, right? And then they became displaced. Whereas in my case, I was born inside of a refugee camp. So that was my entire world. So I didn't have something to benchmark it to. I thought this was normal life. So of course I grew up, I came to realize, there are no other children in this camp. And interestingly enough, my parents, uh, I don't know how they came to the decision to raise and have a child in those circumstances. It might have not been a choice, but uh, it was a life-defining moment and set of experiences. I lived in the camp for about 5 years before moving to the capital city of Sana'a in Yemen, where I spent another about 6 years or so, and then came to the United States at the age of 14. But that's my background. And then I came to upstate New York, out of all places. So that was a big cultural and you know climate change for me in terms of going from a very hot, temperate weather, rainy seasons to a place known for their snowstorms and blizzards. I went to high school there, and then I went to college in upstate New York and lived in Boston. Lived all over the world since then, actually, West Africa, other parts of the Middle East, parts of Europe, and then I'm here now, finally in DC.
Wow. Well, one thing that's been, because we interact periodically throughout the day, early in the mornings. So I always, question in my mind is it's like, because of who I am and who you are on the spiritual
Mhm.
platform, is the question of a lot of people don't know that they are worth something. They are value first to themselves, and because of the knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding that one possesses,
Mhm.
where do you deem or where do you see yourself fit as a worth to your community, a worth to your job, a worth to your friends? What value do you think you bring to the table, so to speak?
Mhm. Well, I had the lucky fortune growing up. Ever since I was a child, I'm told by my uncles, aunties, people in the camp, my parents, of course, that I'm royalty, right? So I've never had to question my worth or value. I think everyone around me is actually, for me, it's been the reverse, where everyone around me has placed me since I was a child in such a told me continuously how worthy I am of everything the world has to offer, even though we have very little, of course, growing up in those circumstances. So it's been sort of more of an internal challenge to believe in myself to the degree that they believed in me,
Mm.
right? And one of the things my mom always says is that I didn't name you, God did, right? And my name is Solomon, and there's a phrase in Latin that says "omenes," which means that your name is your destiny, and so of course, we come from a very religious, conservative background in Ethiopia. There's Eastern Orthodoxy is one of the most popular religions, and reading and going to church, reading about the Bible, learning about my namesake. You learn, I come from a land of kings in Ethiopia. So of course, everyone knows about Emperor Haile Selassie and the Ethiopia being one of the first, I mean, the only country in the continent of Africa to maintain its independence during colonization.
That's well said and well put. So answer for me, put an ending to the phrase of like from where you came from and who you are now. Can you say like now I know that
I can have it all.
wow. And what is all?
Whatever my heart desires, you know. What I've learned is to not set limits on myself. You know, the whole conversation about worth and value, what I've learned from others as well, what I've heard others tell me about my worth and value. Learned that, you know, any limits that I set myself are internal. If there's, you know, there's a whole adage that there's no enemy within, their enemy without can do you no harm. And so, you know, there's no ceiling in your reality or world other than the one you deem and put on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And me being in this place and position in life, I think, is a testimony to that because, you know, the odds of making it to where I am, I'm not a statistician, but I've taken some statistical courses and, you know, they're rounded to a whole number. I think it's a 0%. And I don't know how you define a miracle, but to me, a miracle is anything that is statistically, you know, based on data, the 0% of probability of happening.
You know, I read a little bit about you, not your bio, but just a little bit of your odyssey, and I found it interesting. You know, for me, I'll tell you where I'm going with this. It's like, you know, back in the 60s, 70s, there was Martin Luther King, that voice, and Malcolm X, that voice, Marcus Garvey, and Stokely Carmichael, things, you know, people of that stature. And so we had a voice for the community, for the people of color. And so, but nowadays, whose voice do we have? But you don't have to answer that. After learning a little bit about you, it's like the voice of a refugee. Who do you guys have? I mean, just hearing that still, it is weighing heavy on me. For you to own it, to say it, to claim it, to speak about it. So is there a voice that
Speak to refugees. Hopefully, inshallah, as they say, I will be that voice. But as it stands now, I mean, there are many voices because the term refugee is a non-monolithic term because the refugee represents really all nations at the same time because they're displaced people from every country in this world.
Yeah, globally, I think it's like 87 billion and 27 million are refugees out of that.
So, I mean, thinking of points of contact, right? I mean, out of every 4 or 5 people you know, you probably are connected to some refugee in your daily interactions, right? But you wouldn't know they're refugees.
Right, wow. Because, you know, what I looked up as far as the definition of refugee is it's like forced out of your country, out of your domain, where your status quo, where you was brought up, your culture, your religion, everything, you were forced out. Wow.
But in my case, I wasn't forced out of anything. I was born into it.
Wow.
So this is a certain kind of duality, right? Because my parents have that knowledge, right? They were the ones that were forced out of their homes. Whereas for me, my home is the refugee camp when I was born. So me, it's a kind of, the displacement is an internal displacement because I can't connect to my culture to the same degree that they can. I don't have the strong ties that they have to my, you know, essentially my inheritance, right, in terms of being Ethiopian. Puts a different perspective on the term, and going back to your question about who's the voice of refugees, I mean, I think it's people like me who can claim it fully because you're born into it.
Right, right. And it's like, you know, to me, just hearing and reading a little bit about you, it's like what came to my mind and where you are now, you know, a lot of people deem success different. And so I don't say, I look at you and say, oh, he made it, you know, he's successful. You know, what came to my mind is like coming to America, you know, from whence you came. And you're in America now, and you are somebody in this land, and you've persevered educationally, intellectually. That's big.
Yeah. But the way I think of it, I was somebody long before I became or were known to be somebody. So I had a purpose, that God had a purpose and a plan for me before people put a label on who I was and who I am. So for me, a lot of people in my community do because they look at my life and where I've come and some of my personal accolades and accomplishments and say, "Oh, you are successful," because there's nobody from where we come from who've reached this level that you're at in life. In fact, a lot of people aren't alive anymore to begin with, and I don't know the statistics behind this or the public health data, but a lot of uh, children don't make it past the age of 5 in refugee camps. So if you think about it from, the things that children require, which is proper nutrition, all the various support systems and resources, even for Black women who, raise children in America with all its wealth and resources, right? Child mortality is quite high in some instances. Now think about it in a refugee camp. It's a miracle to even make it past that stage. So that in and of itself is a big sign of success, just staying alive. And to be alive and to thrive is just that's where the miracle comes in.
Wow. So, in one essence, a person could say, "You're a walking miracle. I'm looking at a miracle,"
Mm-hmm.
right? Therefore, and also, it's like the viewpoint of going back to the voice of the refugees, and unbeknownst to me, call me ignorant, label me ignorant, but just to meet someone, so even that knowledge of a refugee, as you said, I could be walking or working with someone that's per se labeled a refugee, but not knowing.
Yeah.
And so just looking at movies, things of that nature, and the war-ridden countries and stuff like third world countries,
Yeah.
To me, it's still like I came up, you could say, on the rough side of the mountain per se, from barefooted boy from Mississippi to where I am now, you could say. But nothing, no bullets flying, no bombs or nothing like that. Here in America, the poverty level came through poverty. I mean, it was times that all we had to eat was onions. I should love onions, but I don't eat onions. I can't stand them now.
Yeah.
But just knowing how a person persevere, not let a negative anything delay you or deny you from where you want to go.
Yeah, I think for me it's a superpower. I'm honored and privileged to claim the term refugee because if I hadn't lived through those sets of experiences, I wouldn't have been able to persevere to the degree that I have or accomplish the things I have, because it gives you that extra kick or drive to really push through really challenging times, because relative to the challenges you face in those circumstances, anything else you face here it pales in comparison. So it gives you an added perspective I think a lot of people may not have if you grew up with a silver spoon, or if you grew up with, with all the resources, all the things you needed to have the life that you have.
Wow. So that thing we talked about, success, not labeling anybody or not putting anybody in a box, but really what is success in America?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, to be in the athlete, oh, I'm successful, I made it.
Mm-hmm.
To even get into the movies, oh, I made it. To a degree in school, education, oh, I made it, I'm successful. So you want to talk about the educational, intellectual part of who you are?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, not just in America, but everywhere else, they associate or define success according to social markers of success, which is wealth, educational level you mentioned, or it could be social ties or who you know, for example, how famous you are. There's plenty of research on this as well, but certain societies or Aboriginal communities, for example, their idea of success or wealth is not tied to these kind of markers. They're tied to relationships. For me, how we define success in my community is based on the strength of your relationships, not how fat your bank account is. And so for me, success, like I said, coming from where I come from, just to be alive is a big blessing and a huge sign of success. I think not just for me, but especially for my parents. We raised this kid in those, we had birthed this child in these circumstances, and he's alive, to see his 30s. That's success. And, I internalize that as my own success as well, just to stay alive, right, on my part. But for me, I think success, particularly at this stage in life, when I reflect on it or meditate on it, I think it's, the parable of the sort of the talents in the Bible, where you make sure you use your God-given abilities. I think that's how I define success. Just making sure that you have an understanding of who you are, and the life that you've lived so far, and helping other people. I think that's really the biggest sign. Success is inspiring others through the talents that you have.
Okay, speaking of inspiration, who inspires you?
I mean, first comes to mind, obviously, my parents.
Okay.
Because I don't know many people, if anybody, that could do what they did, what they had, which is very little, no matter how small or how big what they do. That could be a service worker or a waiter at a restaurant who just seems so passionate about giving you the best advice or recommendations on your menu. Right? That's, to me, it's kind of inspirational because it's not necessarily a glorified a line of work or something that other people attach to success, but they do it to the best of their ability and they do it with excellence. To me, those are the most inspiring individuals.
Okay, this is a little change in the flow of where we're going. Question that I want to implement in others that I interview. Is there anything that you know that you wish you didn't know, but now that you know it, does it affect you? Like if you knew a person, friend of yours, whoever, crapped on themselves and they didn't know that you knew it, but the evidence thereof you knew, and you knew that that person did it. That's a little small thing, but something that you know that you wish you didn't know. And how is it affecting you? Good, bad, or indifferent?
A couple of things. One is I wish I didn't know that I'm capable of great things.
Okay.
Because now I feel this obligation to realize that greatness and make it, prove it to myself that it can happen. Now, if I didn't know I was capable of greatness, I could just go about my life and live in peace. But right now that you know what your talents are, or what your calling is, there's a heavy burden attached to it to self-actualize to that potential that you know you're capable of.
Cause and effect, decisions and choices. The decisions and choices that you made on your Odyssey, what caused and how did it affect you in becoming who you are?
So what caused the Odyssey? I think it's just a realization when I think after graduate school or during graduate school, another refugee who's a mentee of mine. He's a Somali refugee, grew up in the refugee camps in Kenya. He was a junior at the time, and it wasn't a formal mentorship, it was an informal mentor. Of course, as a refugee, I would love to provide any help or resources to other refugees. And then in conversation, I found out he's already written a novel, and by the time he got accepted to undergrad at the Princeton University, he's already published an article in the New York Times and to pursue that generally as a purpose in life, because I think I have a lot of creative talents. I work in a very generally sort of non-creative field for the most part, but I was like, I really made me realize that I have those talents and I should really implement those and work on it and become the storyteller.
Do you have, per se, a short story that you could say right now?
I don't necessarily, not one that comes to mind. I mean, I'm working on a book.
Can you disclose the title of the book?
It's called, the tentative title of the book is In Between Worlds.
In Between Worlds. So therefore, you saying that statement, in between worlds, what worlds are you speaking of?
Yeah, the worlds that the refugees inhabit, both internal, like intrinsic and extrinsic worlds, right?
Okay.
The sort of, W. Du Bois talked about the plight of sort of, as you would say, Negro folk in America, right? The whole concept of the veil and the duality that you face as both being American, but also being a Black American, which means something different for everybody, but there's that duality. And for refugees, it's not really two identities. You're going to have like multiple identities, maybe 3, 4, 5. And so think about the complexity of your inner life and in your external life and trying to reconcile all those different parts of you that make you up as a refugee that really guide the way you navigate this world, right? It's like somebody who's like, think about it this way, let's say you speak 2 languages, right? And then you have to switch between the 2 languages, right? As you go through about your day. But imagine somebody who speaks like 5 languages, how they see the world. It's not the same way. It's either there's a lot of complexity and nuances to that as well. And you need to really dig through that. And there's a lot of beauty that comes from understanding that mind.
Is that friends that right? You have that particular conversation with on that level. And then there are friends, like you said, your mentor, so to speak, the things you may discuss or talk about on a deeper level, versus that friendship level. And then there are people who per se may be on an intellectual level that you can converse with, but you're only on this level of your conversation.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people, they speak of condescending down or condescending up or meeting you on your level.
Yeah, that happens all the time. I mean, that happens in the sense that, so my academic training or research is in neuroscience and neurolinguistics and things like that. Of course, you can't talk about that with everybody, right? So then you talk about it in general terms with lived experiences. So there's the barrier. Like, I don't know if this is what you're getting at in terms of like the language barriers, right? You're trying to communicate a certain concept that you understand on one level, right? But you have to communicate another level that translates to the way that other person experiences their lives. It's a kind of code switching, if you will, but the code switching is not the right term for it. I think it's like
well. I was speaking of in terms of trying to get to the point of it's like in a setting, just say a setting, professor speaking, or somebody has wisdom speaking, or just somebody just spewing out knowledge, and then there are 3 or 4 people that's listening, right, including yourself, and so it's a known fact that people process information different. So what the professor said to the audience, he said it, but 5 or 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 people perceived it different, but heard the same thing. That's mind-blowing. To hear the same word spoken, but you perceived it different than I did. How did you get that out of what he said? I didn't get that. So how did you get that? We process information different.
Yeah. That's the beauty of humanity and lived experiences, right? Even if you actually grew up together, like let's say you have a twin brother, both of you process that information maybe a bit differently. That's what makes you unique. Right? It goes back to the story that we once talked about, the blind men and the elephant. One blind man grabbed the trunk, right, and thought it was a snake. Another grabbed the tusk and thought it was a spear. Another grabbed its legs and thought it was a tree. All right. Another grabbed its body and thought it was a wall. Both of them, all of them, in fact, are correct in their interpretation based on what they've been exposed to, what they've experienced with their senses, right? But the truth is, right, this is neither of any of these things. This is an elephant. So that whole story just gets at what you're trying to speak to as well, which is we all have our own subjective experiences, or we're limited by our perception.
Are you open to meeting people of different mindset, from whatever background, from whatever genre they're in life, wherever walk they are, be it CEO or be it a person that flip burgers at McDonald's?
Yeah.
And if they say something to you, you're willing to converse with them?
Always do. I mean, that's been my life, and I had no choice in it. I lived in a very multicultural. I had a multicultural, global upbringing, right? So, for example, I think it started at the age of 4 or age of 6 or 7. I would speak in Amharic with my parents. Both my parents are not college educated, right? Not to say that they're not intelligent. They're the most intelligent people I know, but we converse on a certain level, in a different language, Amharic. National language. I go to school, and was attending an international school. I got a scholarship at one point in Yemen, and then first half of the day, all our classes would be in Arabic, and then the second half of the day, all my classes were in English. Usually, the English teachers were expats from America, Canada, different parts of the world. So throughout the day, right, I would interact with people from many different countries, each in a separate language. And then once you get out of school, kids in your neighborhood, right? Most of them, of course, are Yemenis, who is Arabic speaking again.
Okay, so in conclusion of speaking with you, it's like had no idea of your wisdom. I'll just use the word wisdom. And from wisdom, your understanding. And from your wisdom of your understanding, the knowledge that you possess. And so I say that in like direction, the directions that you've taken already, the instructions that you receive, and the formula of success.
Or guidance, right?
Exactly.
Or somebody, it doesn't have to be one person per se. It could be a body of people, right? Or a set of people that can help you tap into your own divine wisdom so that you don't have to look for an outside source, that you can realize for yourself your worth and value just by hearing their stories and hearing their voice.
Exactly. The things that we hear in our ear gate, how we process that information that we heard the process. And I can say and see that you process a lot of information.
Yeah. I'm like some of it is not consciously. This is where the mystery and beauty of life is. Sometimes we carry knowledge and wisdom beyond the years and the lives we lead. And so I think the blessing in my life is that my understanding of my spiritual relationship with, for me, God, and, for others, it could be whatever body or, supernatural entity associated with God. But having that kind of spiritual understanding of your own life, it gives you knowledge beyond your years. And that's something I'm certainly blessed with, and grateful for. Like my mom said, yeah, I didn't name you, God did. And I think I'm blessed to be named Solomon. It's a good name to have.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. So as I started off, the voice that you hear, but the wisdom that you're getting from Solomon.
Yeah.
It's named Ordinary Odyssey People, but I think I might rename my sessions now because of you.
Mm.
There's no ordinary people.
Mm.
Everybody is somebody,
Mm.
and everybody's worth something. But the journey, the odyssey, the trek will forever go on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a set of ordinary people but extraordinary experiences are alive.
Well put. Thank you, sir, for
Thank
your
you.
time.